Welcome everybody to our June Austin Tableau user group. My name is Chris Monahan. I'll be your MC today. We've got a great event planned for you. Really excited. Can't wait to show you what we got planned. So let's get started. Um, before each tug event, I always like to thank all the folks that help bring this special event to us each and every month. This, of course, is our advisory council. You guys might be familiar with them if you're a regular. These are the folks that go ahead and plan these events each and every month. They do everything from putting together the speakers, putting together the agenda, and also, of course, making sure that all the invites and everything go out. So, big round of applause for these folks for doing all the hard work and bringing it together. If you are interested in joining our team, and you like marketing or just social media or maybe just networking in general, please reach out to myself or someone on the advisory council. We'd love to have you join. We meet every other week virtually on via Zoom for 30 minutes and talk about different topics and how we were planning the events. And then we meet once a quarter in person for a dinner and happy hour. So it's a lot of fun. If you like networking, please reach out to one of us. All right. So here's our agenda for today. I'm going to do just a couple of housekeeping announcements, and then we're going to have our guest speaker, Chris Westlake, who's a senior BI analyst from JLL and our Iron Viz winner for this year. He's going to present from entrant to finalist, lessons from my Iron Viz journey. So it's a very, very exciting presentation. I've been waiting a couple months for this, so excited to see this. And then afterwards, we're going to be doing our network breakout session again. Ask anyone anything. So that's where we have you guys join a small group here. Just hang out after the presentation, and we'll have a little forum, and we will answer any questions you guys have about Tableau. Anything from adoption to maybe questions about Tableau Desktop or just anything in general about Tableau. So please join that session. As a reminder, our meeting format, this is a virtual tug. It's a live meeting, so please observe customary Zoom etiquette. We do want to see you, so if you want to, go ahead and share your screen. Gallery view is the best experience, so you can see everybody's faces. And of course, if you have any questions, please save them till the end. You can DM Homer, who is our co-host, and he will compile those questions, and we'll have a Q&A after our speaker. So if you like to check out any of our sessions, you can, of course, check out our YouTube channel. I posted the link here, and you can check it out. So some general announcements. We have some upcoming events. We have a break in July. So as you guys know, July is a big travel time for a lot of folks. So we take a 1 month break, and then we'll be right back in August for another virtual event on August 8th. And then in September, we're going to have an in-person/hybrid event, right? And that date and time is TBD. We're locking in the venue, but the plans are to have it at the Austin Tableau office. So it'll be a good time to get together and see the new changes they made to the office as well. So definitely check that out. Another announcement too, we have a Slack community. That's where we post a lot of different topics. We post a lot of our events there as well. And if you have just any general questions about Tableau, so we're going to go ahead and we'll post a link to join our Slack channel. We'll put that in the chat here, and just feel free to join. We'd love to have you join our community there online. All right. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Chris Westlake, as I mentioned, who is a senior BI analyst from JLL. He is also the co-lead of the Scotland tug, so they got a great tug over there as well. But he is more famously known as the Iron Viz 2024 Global Champion. And if you did not see it in person, it was amazing. So can't wait to hear this. So he's going to tell us his journey from entrant to finalist, lessons from my Iron Viz journey. And as full disclaimer, when we first booked Chris, this was before he even won. We had no idea. So I guess we're good at picking winners. So Chris, I will turn it over to you.
Amazing. Thanks, Chris. Let me share my screen with you. Cool. So hopefully you can
Good.
see that. And I will jump straight in here. You've given a wonderful introduction to me. Just want to say hi.
You're on mute. Good.
Let's try that. Okay. Hopefully that'll work better now.
Good.
Cool. We don't need the about me. We do need an agenda. So I want to talk a little bit about Iron Viz today. So looking at what is Iron Viz for anyone on the call that isn't familiar with the process, what the competition is. I then want to talk about my previous Iron Viz entries. This definitely wasn't my first year entering, so I want to kind of go through those, have a look at what I learned along the way and how they ended up getting me to the final and to even winning the final. We'll then move into looking at the visualization that I built in the final, and then look a bit at my process from getting a data set to building a dashboard and then going from that dashboard to a really powerful, concise story out the other end of it. So let's get going with Iron Viz. Iron Viz is the world's largest data visualization competition, and it's a brilliant way to strengthen your data skills, compete with data rock stars, and ultimately have fun. So each year, Tableau run this competition, and they announce a theme that goes together with the global qualifier contest, which anyone in the world can enter. This year, the theme was love, and there were 196 entries. 3 finalists are chosen and given the prize that I'm going to guess every data-loving introvert wants, which is to stand way up at the front of that massive room in front of 7,000 people on stage with dark to no lights and a lot of noise. Who wouldn't want that? So for the final, there's a dataset provided by Tableau, and contestants are given 20 minutes to build the best data visualization they can with that data. So the judging criteria for Iron Viz in both the qualifier contest and the final is as follows. There's equal weighting to each of analysis, design, and storytelling. So I tried to have these kind of in mind with everything that I did this year, not so much in previous years, as you'll maybe see when we jump into my previous entries. So my Iron Viz journey started about a year after I discovered what Tableau was. When I found out that Tableau existed, it was through a lunch and learn session at my company where somebody was sharing their Iron Viz entry for 2018, and it completely caught my attention that there was this competition that used the software that looked really cool, and I knew that I had to get involved. First of all, just using the software, but eventually that grew into wanting to take part in the competition. So when 2020 came around, I had a bit more time on my hands with everything being closed outside. So I thought I'd give it a go and enter. The theme that year was health and well-being, and I built this dashboard looking at ME, chronic fatigue syndrome, which is a kind of less known medical condition, quite closely linked with long COVID, that my sister suffered with for about 10 years. All in all, there wasn't really a lot of data out there about the condition, which meant that the dashboard was kind of lacking the depth and analysis that's included. I also feel, looking back now, that the design possibly wasn't there, but I'd been using Tableau for a year, and I was pretty pleased with this at the time. When the next year came along, 2021, the theme was Viz, what makes you happy? And I think we'd had a little bit of sunshine in Edinburgh that week when the theme was announced. Probably nothing compared to Texas sunshine. It possibly hit 15 degrees Celsius. But there was still enough there to make me happy. So I built this visualization which looks at rain and sunshine in the UK for the last 100 years. The top section that you can see here is looking at the amount of rainfall in each year with these kind of coxcomb charts, I guess, showing the amount of rain in each month for the driest year and the wettest year. Then moves into looking at regional and seasonal differences. So the map on the right shows you how much rainfall there is in the different parts of the United Kingdom. And there's a toggle switch just above the map, which lets you switch between seeing that map for rainfall and seeing it for sunshine. And then on the left, you have these kind of dot plots, which are showing each year for each month, both the amount of rainfall and amount of sunshine. And then I rounded it all off by doing a kind of mirror of the top section, looking at when the cloudiest year was in the UK and when the sunniest year was. Here, there was a lot more data, so it was a lot easier to do a bit more analysis, but it was missing a story. It was really lacking that so what element that's really important in data storytelling. I think the main takeaway from this is in the UK, it's sunnier in the summer and it rains all the time. There's not really a lot of additional information that you take from that. When 2022 came around, the theme was art and literature, and I struggled a lot with finding a topic to focus on for this one. By this point, I knew that I wanted to do something a little bit niche, something that not everyone would choose to do. And I ended up settling on looking at the sentiment of the Psalms, the book in the Bible. So this dashboard basically takes every verse in the Psalms and runs a natural language processing algorithm on it to check how positive or negative the language is within the verse. So in here you can see for Psalm 23, each of those verses are listed in those bar charts, and you can see most of them are positive, but there is that one negative verse. It then goes into looking at why Psalms might be more positive or more negative, looking at whether length is an important factor or the theme. Some things are meant to be happy, some are meant to be sad. But then rounding it all off with this look at how the Psalms compare against each other and seeing that most of them are quite positive. This year, I really felt that my design had come a long way. I'd started using Figma a bit more, and having that background image that ran through the whole thing, I think gave the Viz a really good platform. Again, there wasn't that much of a story, and maybe the analysis was kind of lacking here. 2023 was the year that I really felt like I'd gotten the hang of Iron Viz and how the whole process worked. So the theme that year was games, and I tried really hard not to do a Viz on sport. If you look at my Tableau public profile, a lot of the Vizes in there are sport related, and I thought it would be nice to branch out and do something else. But the more I thought about it, this story just kept jumping into my head. The story of when England won the Rugby World Cup in Australia against Australia. It starts off by looking at the previous times that England and Australia had met in the Rugby World Cup. It then follows both teams through the group stages of the competition into the quarterfinals and the semi-finals, ultimately reaching the final itself. This section looks at the starting lineups of each team, comparing the teams against each other for various metrics like age, weight, caps, other experience factors. Then this section down at the bottom is a timeline looking at the game itself. So to build this, I watched the entire final 3 times over one weekend, pausing it every 5 seconds to make a note of what had happened. It was laborious, but when you enjoy something, it's really easy to spend that much time on it without really noticing it. When you click on one of these silhouettes at the bottom, it brings up a whole load of annotations that go around that timeline to really bring out the story that's hidden in there. I was really happy with the design of this. I felt like it was well grounded, it wasn't too flashy, and had enough elements going on in and around it to really draw in attention. It also had a load of analysis and a really clear story. This Viz ended up being in the top 5 for the EMEA region that year, and that's where I really got the confidence to go out and do my best when the following year's theme came around. So in 2024, the theme was love. And when this came out, it felt really broad. It was Tableau saying, Viz something that you enjoy, something that you like, something that makes your heart full. And a few things came to mind instantly. I love rugby and sport. I love my wife, but I also really love food. So I decided to focus on food for this one. And what you see in the top section is a few heat maps that go through recipes of my favorite foods to cook and share with friends. But then the Viz takes a slightly different turn, and it looks at the 739 million people in the world that don't have enough food, and starts to look at how much I dislike that, but love that we're committed to making that number lower and hopefully getting rid of undernourishment as time goes by. It looks at where in the world there's undernourishment. So in each of these kind of sections, the 7 sections that you see there, it's quite small on the screen, are a region of the world. Each of them has an expand button, which opens up a view showing you each country within that region and the undernourishment rate within that country over time. It then looks at how we can end undernourishment, giving an analysis of how education, gender equality, and climate change can all be used to help get that number lower and improve the economy in any society. And then finally, rounding it off, trying to keep in mind that theme that I had to make this fit into, which was what makes my heart full about this. And ultimately, it's that we're getting better. So this is kind of in 2 sections. You have this list of countries up here, which have achieved the lowest rate of undernourishment possible, and then a much longer list below, which are countries that have improved over the past 20 years. Ultimately, it's a picture of hope. And I feel like there was a ton of analysis in here. It was a relevant topic that was applicable to lots of people. We all know that there's hunger in the world, and I think everybody kind of cares about that and wants to change it. There was a story going through it. Where is there undernourishment? How can we stop that? And how has it actually improved over the past 20 years? And the design all came together really nicely with a limited use of color and really simple charts that really popped. So following entering that visualization, I kind of forgot about it for a few months and then got an email saying that I'd made it to the final. So fast forward a few months after that, and I was on stage and I built this visualization, looking at ratings of shows on the IMDb platform. And I was going to walk you through this visualization and show you how it works. But I thought an easier way to do that would be to play you a video of my 3-minute presentation from the Iron Viz final, which hopefully I can do with sound.
Thanks, Otrana. Judges, data fam, hands up if you watched TV when you were growing up. Well, I was the weird kid at school who didn't have a TV at home. So since getting a TV, I've often wanted to know what shows are worth catching up on. I was really excited to get this data set. Let me introduce you to the IMDb Explorer. Of the 250 most voted for shows, we see 2 that stand out from the rest. Game of Thrones and Breaking Bad are both very highly rated and have over 2 million votes each, a testament to both their quality and popularity. Changing that vertical axis to position dots by number of episodes instead of number of votes gives us a view of each show's longevity. Suddenly, those 2 don't stand out so much. But let's zoom in on the highest rated shows, those with a rating of 9 out of 10 or higher. Here, there's one show that sits above the rest. The Office, a mockumentary that teaches us that an office is a place to live life to the fullest, to the max, to an office is a place where dreams come true. Let's take a look. The dots on this chart are the show's 188 episodes, positioned by their average rating. The rating of episodes is completely separate from that series rating we were looking at previously. In fact, for The Office, you can see here that the series rating is higher than the average episode rating in any one season. There are a handful of episodes that do rate higher than that series rating. These episodes are highlighted in red, and they're the ones that we remember the most, like Stress Relief, or Goodbye Michael. We see a drop-off in the show's ratings in the final 2 seasons. Let's see if the cast can help us work out why. Michael Scott, the world's best boss, played by Steve Carell, features in every episode until the end of season 7, leaving just before the ratings drop. Could losing such a main character be the reason for the decline? And where did Steve Carell go after The Office anyway? Between leaving The Office and starring in Space Force, he hardly features on television at all. As data people, we tend to focus on the data that's in front of us, ignoring the gaps. There's definitely a gap in here. So let's look at this from another angle. Awards are an important part of an actor's career, and Steve Carell has won and been nominated for many. The Office was a huge success, but in that gap that we identified, Steve was crushing it on the cinematic scene. But what if you've never watched The Office? What if you've never even heard of Steve Carell? Maybe you want to know when the ratings of The Simpsons began to decline, or what Bryan Cranston's career looked like before Breaking Bad. With this dashboard, you can. Pick your own favorite TV show and go exploring.
So that is kind of the finished product of a lot of hours of work. And what I want to do now is kind of talk through how I went from that data set to that finished presentation.
Thanks, Otrana.
Cool. So we'll start with the data set. It was a data set from IMDb looking at TV shows going back to 1927. It's a huge data set with 61 million rows, and it's coming to you soon. I'm not sure when, but it's coming. It's the sequel to Tableau's Data Plus Movies challenge, which they released in November, December last year. And I can't wait to see what other people do with this data as well. So with tables of lists of series, episodes, cast members, awards, ratings, how do you find a concise story in 61 million rows of data? I started much as you would with a business dashboard, asking my stakeholders, the public, people that I knew, what they'd want to see from something like this, but not directly, because nobody was allowed to know what the data was. So I asked questions like, what's your favorite TV show? Who's your favorite character? What TV show should I watch next? The problem with this was everyone has a different answer to these questions. I think I asked 10 people what their favorite TV show was, and I ended up with 10 different answers, 5 of which I'd never even heard of. It was at this point that I knew that this had to be an exploratory dashboard. I couldn't just focus on one TV show or one genre. It had to be something that people could drill into themselves and find a story in it that really appealed to them and matched with their interests. So with that rough idea in hand, I needed to simplify the data. And somewhere in this Tableau prep flow, there is simplification. So the first step at the top of this is just keeping the 250 most voted for shows. The main reason for picking the 250 was to keep the size of the file down a little bit so that Tableau didn't freeze during my 20 minutes, taking up precious seconds that I really couldn't afford to lose. We then come into bringing in the character data. So we kept the 15 most kind of influential characters in each TV show and joined into that all the other TV shows that they featured in and their awards. And this mess at the bottom is how I created the radial chart. There's a lot of stuff going in here, and hopefully we'll come back to this at the end of the presentation. So with a data set that worked and one data set so that it only took a few seconds to bring into Tableau during the final, I was ready to start thinking about the judging criteria. So we'll start with the analysis. As I said, I wanted to keep this open, but still have ways of analyzing the data very clearly within the tool so that people could really see the depth that was available here. You conduct the analysis to tell your own story using the tools that are here. Things like controlling the scatter plot, changing the measure on that vertical axis or what the size of the dots represents, and being able to filter and really tease out the trends that are here, being able to find outliers in these different things like I did to find the office in my presentation. You also have the highlighting of exceptional episodes. This one is probably something that I'd do a bit differently if I were to do it again. This idea of outliers being just those that are above the series rating is a bit hard to comprehend and not really what we think of as outliers in a more general sense. But the analysis is still there. You can also follow the cast member's career, and through this, you can analyze where they went after your chosen show, whether there were any gaps, and what they were doing perhaps in those gaps, or maybe where their career started. The design was the part of the process that I think I enjoyed the most. The first part of this was thinking about the layout of the dashboard that I wanted to build as the finished product. This was completely different to the feeder entries that I'd done previously. For each of the qualifier entries, you'll notice that they were all long form. It's impossible to see all of them on one screen. You have to scroll down, but you always have that option of going back up for context at what you've just seen before, in case you forget. With Iron Viz, it's a very different format. I wasn't handing this viz over to people to look at themselves. I was presenting it on a big screen. And much like I'm doing here, I didn't want people to be able to see the whole story before I was ready to tell it. If I show you all the information that's coming on this slide, you probably won't listen to what I'm actually saying very closely. And it would have been the same if that radial chart had come up when I first started presenting and tried to talk about a scatter plot in the top left corner. The next part of the design was thinking about chart types. And much like I did with my qualifier entry this year, I wanted to keep things simple. Ultimately, all of the charts that are in my final dashboard are either scatter plots or bar charts. There's a little bit of creative flair in there, like bending that radial axis, but ultimately they're charts that we know instinctively how to read and how to understand. So you're not needing to spend time explaining the charts to people, and people that are looking at the dashboard aren't needing to spend loads of time understanding it. And the final thing with regards to design is the color. I really like to use colors that people already associate with different things in their heads. So things like the yellow that you see on the dashboard is the yellow that you'll see on the IMDb website. It's an association that you already have, and it just helps kind of hone that story and keep people's attention. I took this a step further by bringing in a blue and a red that are heavily associated with the TV show The Office as a kind of nod towards that direction so that it didn't feel like a completely foreign concept when I went there. And finally, the storytelling. The part of this that's probably the most different in the final. In the final, all of the storytelling marks come from that 3-minute presentation that I played for you. And standing in front of 7,000 people really isn't my strong point. It's definitely not my comfort zone. But I knew that I needed to make that 3-minute presentation really count for something. And while I was there, I wanted to be comfortable, confident, and definitely a lot more at ease than I look in that photo. I'd built a dashboard that had 3,750 stories that can be told with it, 250 shows, 15 cast members in each. But I really only had time to tell one, and I wanted to make that one story as engaging and as creative as I possibly could. So how do you do that? The first thing was to make it engaging. When I started the presentation, I started with a question, and it was a question that I pretty well knew the answer to already. Who watched TV when they were growing up? Asking a question like that, it makes it applicable to the people that you're speaking to, and it kind of makes the presentation feel more about them. And from that point, they were engaged. They wanted to know where I was going next because it was personal. It was about them. It also gave me a huge sense of power, I guess, knowing that I was standing in front of 7,000 people and I could tell them to put their hands up and they'd all do it. It's something that I'd never felt before and probably won't feel for a very long time. The next thing is to make it relatable. By picking a story that resonates with as many people as possible, you keep that interest going that you already had. The Office is my favourite TV show, but it's also the favourite TV show of a lot of other people in the world, particularly in the US. It's the most streamed TV show out there, which to me made it a very obvious choice because there can't have been that many people in the room who had never watched it. And if there were, they were probably familiar enough with the ideas behind it that they could follow along the story without too much difficulty. And the final thing is to make it flow. From beginning to end, the dashboard starts at a very high level and gets more and more granular as you go through. You go from that bird's eye view of looking at all of the series ratings and then selecting a series, going into the episodes of that series, and then looking at the cast of those in each of those episodes. You find yourself looking at this from a worm's eye view instead of the bird's eye view. So that's ultimately how I ended up with that final dashboard from that really big data set that we saw at the beginning. But I wanted to build into this a little bit more of a practical side, and something that people have asked me a lot about is how did you build the radial chart and how did it come together so quickly in those 20 minutes? So I said that we'd come back to this orange section of my Tableau prep flow. So this is just half of it, and the other half is identical. One half does the main radial in that big view. The other half is the rotated version, which just takes up half the amount of room. So in this flow, what I'm doing is picking start and end angles for each of the radial sections. So for most shows, it starts at 30 degrees on the left and goes round to 150 degrees. It keeps everything nice and symmetrical and leaves you with a nice bit of room without it being a full semicircle. The reason I said most shows is there are some shows that really don't have enough episodes to show on such a big area. For those shows, I made it a little bit smaller so that things didn't feel really spaced out. And kind of leading on from that, you have to determine what angle each of your episodes will sit at within that view. So for smaller episodes, for smaller series, they each had 1 degree per episode. For the larger series, they divided that 120 degree kind of space between themselves equally. So once you have your angles, you're able to start coming up with the coordinates for the points that would ultimately plot that chart for you. And for this, you just need to remember high school trigonometry and probably know how to use Google because who can remember high school geometry? So in this case, the radius was the episode rating, and the angle is that angle that we just looked at previously. So I did this for the episode dots, but I also did it for the backdrop that you see sitting behind the radial and all of the reference lines that are on there as well. So let's jump into Tableau and have a look at how that data source looked and how it pulled into the radial chart in the end. So one of the things that I did in my data prep was renamed all of the fields so that it was easy to see which fields needed to be used in which sheet. So all of the fields had this precursor on them, which was S, followed by a number, which just made it really easy for me to filter down that list of far too many fields to do anything quickly. So looking at the radial fields, there's a filter in here, which I brought in first, which we just want to select true on, and that will then only show us the radial for our selected show. We can then dive into the first level, and again, another level of the field naming. Each of these is sheet 3 level number. So we start with level 1, and I'll show you this calculation, which is just taking those X and Y coordinates that we had before and putting them into a make point calculation, which enables this to plot that point on a map in Tableau. So by double clicking on that field, we see each of those points that make up that backdrop start to appear. We don't want this to be a map, we want it to be a polygon, and we want all of the dots to follow this path. We can then bring in our season reference onto detail so that we get those dividing lines, which become more clear when we turn everything down a bit like this. We can then add in our second layer. And once we've added that in, we can swap these axes around, because at the moment, this is A, showing on a map, and B, not in the orientation that we want it to show in. So by taking latitude off the view, we can put longitude onto rows and then type latitude into the columns. And suddenly we have something that looks a bit more like what we were aiming for. We want the reference lines to be a line, and we want them to follow this path going from left to right. We can then add text labels and this field to detail, which gives us that 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 reference line. I'm not going to go through the rest of the parts with this in great detail, but what I will do is show you the finished product and how it all comes together. So at this point, we have the backdrop and those reference lines, and we can then add in the series average, the season average lines, the series average line, and the dots that bring everything together and give it all a bit of meaning. We also have this top layer, which gives us the text in the top left corner, which just grounds everything and gives it all a little bit of context. Also hidden behind this text is something that I didn't manage to talk about on stage, and I'm not sure how many people have actually found this. What this chart does, hidden in the tooltip, is gives you a reference back to where you've come from on the scatter plot on the page before. It reminds you maybe why you picked that show, where it sits in relation to the other shows included in the dashboard, and whether it's an outlier sitting outside of a reasonable range of the average rating of all shows. So that's, in a nutshell, how the radial came together in the final. I think that took me about 3 minutes to go through that much of it. It took me under 2.5 minutes to build in the final, which just gives you some sort of an idea of how much adrenaline there was and just how fast that 20 minutes went. If you've liked what you've heard today, I've recently launched a website where I'm going to be posting blogs looking at the different elements of Iron Viz initially. I'll post a full tutorial of the radial chart, which you can recreate once you have the data and maybe use it for other use cases as well. So do check this out. Thank you for having me and listening to me ramble on about my process behind Iron Viz. Feel free to connect with me on Twitter or X. That icon probably needs changing, or connect with me on LinkedIn, or contact me through my blog. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Chris. Yeah, that was an amazing presentation. Yeah, I know this it sounds like can't even imagine how much work went into this. I guess before we open it up, I had a question or two. I guess end to end. So when you first like found out like, okay, now they're accepting, entries, right? How long is that process? How many months is the whole thing?
So they opened the qualifier at the beginning of October.
Mhm.
That then runs for 4 weeks until the end of October. And then they announced the winners in January. And then the final was end of April. So it's 6-7 months, is that?
Yeah, wow. And how long do you get like so when you find out you are a finalist, how long do you have to present or prepare your presentation? I missed that part.
So we get the data about a month before the final itself. So I think we got the data at around the end of March. We
And
got
you
the
have to
data.
you have to submit that prior to TC, and then the judges don't actually see it until
Yeah,
the event
that's
itself.
right.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
Pretty
It's a
intense.
long process, but
Yeah.
no, it's good fun.
Yeah. Well, Homer, any questions from the group?
I don't have any that were DM'd to me, but if someone would like to come off of mute and ask a question directly, I think that would work as well.
Yeah. Any questions out there? Because I probably have a couple. Um, or you could DM Homer directly, of course, too, if you're shy and don't want to speak up. Yeah, I guess one question. I mean, what advice would you give someone who's trying to, I mean, you were persistent. You did for 5 years, trying and trying and trying. Now that you know, what advice would you give someone? How do you crack the top to try to even be one of the final qualifiers? Yeah, maybe not win it all, but just be up there somewhere.
I think for me, the key was really finding a topic that I was passionate about for the qualifier. I think the qualifier is in many ways a lot harder than the final itself. Once you get past the being on stage thing, kind of there's all the data collection side that goes into it, and you really need a solid idea with a lot of data available. And yeah, I think having something that you're passionate about, that you love, that you can really dive into for those 4 weeks that the qualifier contest is open for, really helps to kind of make that an easier process. And it helps you go deeper into that analysis than you would if it's a project that you're not really that invested in.
Yeah, no, that does make sense. I guess when you're creating your final, the final product there, would you say that like someone should probably focus more on the visualizations than maybe some of, a lot of people try to cram in some whiz bang features and tricks, you call them, right, in Tableau. I mean, is that another angle to try to win a crowd or I know it's all about storytelling too, but have you seen that approach work as well, or I don't know.
For the final, definitely. I mean, that's why I had the animations in there. In Tableau, animations are default half a second, I think, when you switch from one page to another. I had this turned down to 2 or 3 seconds just to really draw in the crowd's attention and kind of add that wow factor.
All right, cool. All right. Oh, we have one, Homer. I think we have one in the chat there.
Yeah, a great question came from Nancy Putnam. It says, I'll paraphrase, how's your life changed since you won? Did you get a raise?
Wow. Okay. Thanks, Nancy.
No raise, no raise yet, but I should definitely be plugging that one. I think that the main way that it's changed is being able to come and do presentations like this and meet lots more people that I probably wouldn't have connected with otherwise. It's still very much riding the wave of having one, and we'll see what's next soon, hopefully.
I know you're incredibly popular right now doing the circuit, so that's good. Thank you for taking the time. There is another question from Josh, who asked, what data sources do you typically look for when you're doing, like, where do you source your data sources from? Are there any common sites where you like to go, that just a common popular one?
So for kind of smaller projects that I do, I tend to actually look through the Makeover Monday site, looking at kind of past weeks worth of data. They've got, I don't know, I can remember it being 300 weeks of Makeover Monday not so long ago. Probably was longer ago than I think it was. But there's a huge range of data sources there, which are a really great starting point for any project. I also think looking at kind of the various community initiatives out there, like Sports Viz Sunday, Games Night Viz, there are loads of things like this which have kind of free to use data sets available through their websites, which is also a great place to look.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's great advice, because there's tons. That's a great thing about Tableau community. It's so large and so many great people doing fantastic stuff. They have all sorts of resources that they're willing to share. So that's
completely.
The Christian asked a question. It can be a little intimidating, right, to submit your work and put yourself out there. What advice would you give someone who are afraid to maybe submit their projects for Iron Viz? How do you get over that? I don't know.
I'm guessing saying just go for it isn't really going to help here. But ultimately, I think that is the answer. Is the slogan that Tableau have put on Iron Viz is win or learn, you can't lose. And I think going from that first Iron Viz entry that I showed you, that I submitted, it wasn't anything flash. It wasn't anything that was eye-catching. Now looking at it, I'm kind of, I don't know, I'm not particularly proud of it, but it's a starting point. And like you were just saying, Chris, the supportive community that there is kind of in the Tableau sphere, you'll get people reaching out to you, wanting to encourage you and give you tips on how to improve, how to get better. And it's a really great way to learn.
Yeah. Well, thank you again. Everyone give Chris a big virtual round of applause here. So thank you for
One more.
Oh, we got one more? Oh,
Joseph wants to know, who is your favorite character on The Office?
You have to close with that.
That is a tough one. I think probably Dwight.
Dwight's good.
Yeah.
Yep. I like Andy. He's pretty fun too.
Uh-huh.
There's so many. But
Yeah.
yeah. Well, again, you'll get a second round of applause. Excellent job. Congratulations to all your success. This is amazing stuff, and we'd love to have you back sometime too. So thank you very much for spending your evening and sharing your story with us.
No, thank you for having me. It's been great.
All right. Thanks.